So, welcome everyone to the August Academy for Treasurers. I am Bridget Jordan. I'm the LWVMN Accounting Manager, and joining me on the presentation today is Barb Anderson. She is our Board Treasurer. And we're going to kind of split up the presentation today. So the August Academy was designed to, it was designed to be a training tool for the local league leaders, for any interested members to kind of communicate with you guys any of our deadlines or other information, and then also just to give you a chance. You guys, we recognize as the local league treasurers are the real experts here, and so really just to give you a chance to network and work with each other as well, and give you a chance to ask questions of each other and use each other's expertise. So that is the goal today. Barb and I will be telling you about a couple of different deadlines that involve the state office, one being the financial reports that our LLCs have to send to us each year. We'll also be talking a little bit about Irs Communications. Barb is going to go over some best practices for bookkeeping and budgeting. And then at the end, we'll give plenty of time for questions of us, questions of each other. Again, a chance for you guys to ask anything of each other. So that's the plan for the day. So I will start with the couple of reporting deadlines that I want to communicate with you guys. In January, your local leagues update your rosters. So you let us know how many household members you have, how many individual members, if you have student or low income members, you communicate all those things and make sure that your rosters are up to date. And from those numbers that you pull, our office creates then an invoice for you to pay of your dues. This invoice is due on March 31st if you want to take advantage of the 5% discount. We give a 5% discount for fast payment of those invoices. So feel free to take advantage of that. If you prefer not to, it's completely fine to pay it after that March 31st deadline, but know then that you won't get that 5% discount. Then the other major deadline as far as finances go from the local league are those financial reports that I mentioned before. Now, 24 of our local leagues out there in Minnesota are LLCs under the state league's umbrella, which means that we report on our 990 for those 24 local leagues. So we have to ask for these financial reports so that we can get that financial information to report on our 990. Part of the perk, one of the perks of being an LLC under our umbrella is that you no longer have to file your own 990. We do that for you. So this financial report is what communicates that information to us. And that I usually send out sometime in March, and it is due along with copies of your checking, your savings, any investment accounts, any of those statements along with those reports are due to me by the end of April. It sounds like we're going to be doing another of these academies in about 6 months. And at that point, that's right before these financial reports are sent out. So at that point, I will do another academy specifically on those financial reports so we can get more into the details of those financial reports at that time. But just for now, I want to kind of go over the basics of the secret to success of that financial report is that you start with your beginning of the fiscal year bank balance. You add your revenues. So let me just use an instance. So for this last year, the people that reported, they started with their bank balances as of March 31st, 2020. Then they added their revenues for the year between April 2020 and March 2021. They added those revenues to the bank balance. They subtracted their expenses from that, and then that should come out to your new end of fiscal year bank balance. So that would have been the bank balance as of March 31st, 2021. And this is where I see the most errors in the reports coming back, is that bank balance plus the revenues minus the expenses doesn't equal the new bank balance. And so it's just a good check for you before you send that report, to make sure that that comes out correctly. Otherwise, I'm going to be contacting you to say, I would love it if you would have another look at that and see if we can figure out. And I'm happy to work with you if you're having issues figuring out where that problem is occurring. I'm happy to kind of noodle through it and try and figure out where that might be happening. So that is the financial report. And then the last piece that I'm going to talk a little bit about are IRS communications. If any of you receive any IRS communications that you have any questions about, please feel free to reach out to our office. I would be happy to try and help you with that. Nick is also, you would probably start with me, and then if I can't help you, Nick is sometimes great at helping with that. But the most important thing about these IRS communications is that if you are one of our 24 LLCs and you get an IRS communication, please forward that directly to our office. Don't try and handle it yourself. We have had problems with the IRS continuing to request that you file 990s, even though you are filing your 990, we are filing your 990 for you. And we have spent the last couple of years working really hard to resolve this with the IRS. So we want to know if any local leagues are continuing to get those requests for the 990, and they are not recognizing that our 990 is your 990. So, as I said, I mean, probably just best case scenario, if you receive any communications from the IRS, any of you, just contact our office and we'll be happy to help you. And now I'm going to hand it over to Barb.
Thank you, Bridget.
Mm-hmm.
First thing I wanted to talk about was just a few best practices in bookkeeping. Most of our leagues are small enough that it doesn't take anything real complicated, but it's a good idea to have some kind of system in place for keeping track of your expenses and revenues and your bank statements. And so we recommend that you use a spreadsheet, something like Excel, or you could also use Quicken if you use that for your personal use. You could also use that for league use. The next thing is, when you're setting up your system, to make sure that you keep track of revenues and expenses by your budget category. So when you establish your budget, it's just a lot easier to create your budget and monitor things if you stay within those parameters as you're recording your revenues and expenses. And I do, on the next slide that we won't go to quite yet, I've got an example of how you might do that. The next recommendation is that you document all your expenses. So make sure that you require and keep receipts, and that you also use some kind of form that your members have to fill out when they request reimbursement. So the receipts can be attached to that. You can indicate the category of the expense, and also then it can be signed off by the committee chair or the president, depending on how your individual league is set up. So on the next slide, I've just got an example of how you might keep track of your expenses and revenues. Just make sure you include the date and the payee and the description of what the expense is and a check number and the total amount. And then you can have your different expense or revenue categories. And on this spreadsheet, then everything totals out at the end. So if you've got a payment to someone that it's being split between a couple of different categories, you're still sure that you're keeping track of everything correctly. And you do the same thing with revenues, except you'll obviously have a few fewer revenue categories, but the same concept applies. And then on the next, just a few words about budgeting. The budgeting process should start with some kind of direction from your board for any priorities they might have for the coming year. And do they want to continue what the priorities have been? Do they want to make changes? Do they want to spend more money on voter services and less on something else? Do we need to spend more money for technology because of needing to use Zoom more often? So those kinds of parameters should be established before you start doing the actual budget. And then in general, it's a good idea to base your budget on your actual expenses for the previous year. So where did we spend most of our money? Is that where we wanted to spend it? Is that where we want to continue to spend it? Are we going to continue to do those same things that we need to do it for? And then you revise it for any differences in priorities or emphasis on different activities. And you do the same thing with estimating your revenues. The two main sources of revenue are membership and fundraising. So are we going to have the same number of members, do we think? Are we going to expect that our membership will increase or decrease? And you make your projections on your membership revenue based on that. So once the revenue is established, you estimate your expenses and you go through the process and revise it as needed. And some of it depends on if you are ending the past year with a balance in your bank account that you can fund any excess of expense over revenue. So if there's something that you want to do in your priorities, but you're not generating enough revenue, you might have enough of a fund balance in your bank account that you can continue to support those activities. So just a couple of ideas for things to look at as you're doing your budgeting. And I think that's it.
Yeah, I think that's the end of our presentation part. So at this point, we really want to open it up for questions, as I said, of Barb or I, of each other, anything. So let us know. What do you need to know?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So we just started collecting dues and looking at maybe some other things via PayPal. So when I'm, just starting, since that, and it's actually, it's working out well, it is basically aligning with our fiscal year. And so when I record those, so my initial thought was, so it's like a $75 membership. Well, we don't actually get $75. So I was thinking that though, when I actually acknowledge the, give a receipt later in the year, I would say, well, you obviously gave us $75, but then in my treasurer's report, because that's not what I'm actually getting, I would record the amount that we actually get. But then as I was thinking about that, it's like, well, do I need to, I mean, and so, you know, are those administrative fees? Do you need to know that PayPal is actually keeping some money or not? So I guess that's my question is, does the amount, I mean, I'm keeping track in a separate form, how much money we're losing. And but then in a way we're losing it, but we're not losing it because we did put on our form to say, if you would like to help us cover the cost, it is approximately, you know, include an extra $3. And so for some things we make money and for some we lose money with that. So I'm just keeping track of that. But so what is it that I actually need to record for PayPal?
I would record the entire amount you get as dues and then record what's being subtracted as an expense.
That's what we do in Edina.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm doing also. Income, expense, and you had said that you're doing like a receipt. I give them credit for what they gave. So they were giving 75. So I would identify that. And then of course I've been adding to it that little element of how much is actually tax deductible based on what we also have learned. So they have a receipt that says you gave 75 and just I'll pull a number off. And of that 75, 4250 is tax deductible or whatever it would be.
Okay, so what you're saying is if it's $75, but I only receive, I'm just gonna round numbers, say 70 in the bank. But so what I need to record as income is actually 75, and so then it will no longer match the bank statement?
Well, you'll have $5 as expense.
Right, but I know in the past, it was always really nice that income matched the bank statement, and now it will no longer match the bank statement.
Jenny, rather than putting it as an expense, you could also put it as a line item as negative revenue. So it's the same as an expense, but then it'll make it easier for you to match up to your bank statement.
Okay, because okay, I've been told before we never wanted negative revenue. So I like
There
that
are
better.
some cases where it's okay.
Right, because it's always, and then again, like you said, you know, the nice little formula is your beginning bank balance plus minuses and bank balance. And now if this money never actually came through my bank, it just makes it much more difficult to track and for other people who are watching to really say, yes, you're doing the right thing. Now, one of the other things, someone else who, again, I use a lot of different things. I'm on a lot of different groups. And so someone said that when they went to a website to make a donation, it takes it to a paypal.com thing charity, and it appears that PayPal pays the fees and then gives the money back to the charity through a donor advised fund. Has you ever heard about anything like that? Is that something we should be looking into?
I've not heard of that.
I haven't either.
Okay, so what I will do is, so she said it takes her to this. I can send you, well, actually, you know what? I'm just going to forward you this whole email. There's nothing secret in it. Okay, so if I forward this email, who should get it? So who do you want me to send this email that has a link on how to that with PayPal?
You can send it to me and I can forward it to like Barb and Susan too, so they can look at it. Susan is our treasurer.
No, finance.
Or, sorry, finance chair. Barb's the treasurer. Susan's the finance chair. So they also bring a lot of expertise. So we can have a look at that. I mean, sounds like a good deal.
Yeah, it really did and stuff. Okay, so Bridget, I'm going to send this to you right now. It's basically, it says, you know, when I go to the website, it takes me here, so you could just click on that link and see what it says.
Perfect.
And stuff. So great. But so if something changes, that will be great. But in the meantime, I will do a negative expense or negative income.
Yeah, and Ginny, I mean, if you want me to set up a Zoom with you sometime and I can actually look at how you're recording things and maybe make a different suggestion or something, we could do that too if this feels uncomfortable to you.
No, and actually we're just moving, I mean, I inherited the spreadsheet that I've just been adding on to, but we are moving everything to Google Docs on Google Drive. So
Yeah.
I'm going to be looking, this is the right time, and I just actually need to remember that had told myself I was going to do it and I haven't yet, to look at what Google does, has their capability. So I'll look at that and kind of see.
Okay, great. Well, feel free to reach out if it's not feeling good when you give that a try.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
I have a question. Can
Go
you hear?
ahead, Sharon.
We can, yeah. Please,
right.
go ahead.
We just received a notice in July that PayPal is doubling our fees.
Oof,
And it's because we're low volume, of course.
yeah.
And I wondered if there was any thought at the state. I belong to another organization where they do, bulk PayPal, and the money's routed to the different chapters kind of thing. And that way your volume is such that you don't,
Yeah.
I mean, considering the hunk that the state and the national takes, we're going to have very little left.
Yeah.
The doubling
Yeah.
of the fees.
And I am not aware that we've looked at that before, but I will bring it up
Thank you.
as a concern. Yep. Yeah, because I could see how that would be really helpful if we all were processing together and lowering fees. So I will look into that and get back to you, Sharon.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I haven't actually looked at the one we got, but again, another organization that does it. He figured it all out. So I don't know if it's a different formula, but again, we're also low volume. And he said that the difference between what it had been and what it will be, we would lose money. And I think the breaking point was like around $95. But we would actually get more for anything that was more than that. So that's something else to look at, is at what point does it actually change? Because it turned out, I was thinking about that, and I thought, we're close enough, or maybe it was even less than that. Maybe it was more like $80. I'd have to, I can find his email. But so that it was going to be bad, but if you had for a lot of small donations, but if they were more like membership, it wasn't going to be as bad as it seemed.
So you're saying for each donation, Jenny, as long as or for each transaction, if the transaction was over a certain amount, the fees were lowered.
Yeah, so it was like they changed their formula. And let me see here. Oh, here we go. Yeah, so he said that the break-even point was $90, and that the donations under 90 have a higher fee, but donations over 90 will have a lower fee. And
well, this impacts some chapters seriously more than others, because our chapter, we cover Minnetonka, Hopkins, and Eden Prairie. And because of the need to get younger members, we've tried to keep our dues low. Yeah. So I think some chapters will be impacted more than others where you have higher dues.
Yeah, and Sharon, I mean, I think, people are moving to paying things online rather than sending checks, which you had no fees with. So,
exactly.
This is something we're going to be dealing with. Yep. So it's a great point. I'll look into it. Any other questions?
Bridget, when you were talking about, maybe we should all be processing together, what did you mean?
Processing what?
Well, you were talking, when Jenny was talking about, that they were low volume, were you talking about collecting all the dues?
Well, I just meant if we were all using the same PayPal account, then then I'm assuming our fees would be lower because there would be more volume.
But then you'd have to send the money back to the leagues.
Yeah, yeah, and I know I think we've talked on and off about that, you know, trying to take advantage of lower fees and, you know, doing stuff like that. But then it, you know, becomes a whole, how do we do that accounting at the main office and make sure that lines don't get crossed and everybody's money is going in the right pot, so.
And if it's a per transaction rate that differs, it
Right,
wouldn't make
maybe it
any
won't make a
difference.
difference. Right, Sharon, you need to unmute yourself.
I had my hand up, so and then I thought, well, you know, if you weren't using that feature, I'm a former CIO and CFO, okay?
Yeah.
So I've seen this done, and the way you have to do it is you have a link on each of the websites to the central organization that's handling it. And then that central organization gets the money. So the form you use has to be, you know, something that they can use to route the money. So that's the way it has to be set up. And it certainly makes it, you know, you're going to have the one volume then, but you know, you do need some IT work with your website. And then right now, the way we do things with our website anyway is we put stuff on the state and it just automatically populates to our website. So it's kind of the reverse of that, but then it just gets transferred to you, just like when you're transferring out of PayPal. So that's the way I've seen it work. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I think if you have to do that, we'll have to do that, but hopefully maybe the other thing I talked about before, that PayPal just actually refunds the fees. And then if that works, it doesn't matter how much they are.
Right,
Because we'll just
right.
get it all back.
Right.
But like, yeah, look into that first.
Mm-hmm.
Bridget, is this a good time to introduce Lorene?
That's what I was thinking, Barb.
That would be wonderful. Lorene, do you want to introduce yourself and say a few words?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Cool. I'm just immersing myself in the August Academy and so excited to be on board. I'm going to actually go into the office for the first time next week. And I'm sure we'll be getting to know each other. So I'm extremely excited to be involved. Thank you.
Yes, Lorene is our new part-time administrative person at the office, in case you hadn't heard.
Thank you.
Welcome, Lorene. We're so glad to have you.
No other
right.
questions? Well, that's a good thing, right?
Well, and as always, feel free to reach out to me anytime you do have questions. You now have seen some faces and have some names of some other treasurers, so be a resource to each other as well. As I said, I'm not doing the local league accounting, so I don't consider myself an expert, but I'm happy to try and answer stuff and to connect you guys to each other as well. So reach out with any questions. And thank you so much for coming. Nice to see all of you.
Bye.
Bye.